Hey everyone, this is Dr. Syed Haider with My Go-To Doc and My Go-To Stack. Actually, at My Go-To Stack, we just launched Malungu, in case anyone hasn't heard. So it took us a while. It always takes a lot longer than you think it will. It is the best herbal supplement I've ever seen for sleep and for anxiety also. So two things that are really, really helpful to be able to treat with a natural supplement. If somebody has long COVID or vaccine injury or just struggles with anxiety or insomnia. I do think at the same time, you should always be addressing the underlying root cause. Like these are, you know, you don't want to just rely on something for the rest of your life for insomnia. You want to figure out why you have insomnia, obviously, whether it's inflammation or whatever. Usually some sort of inflammation, right? The important thing to understand about inflammation, just as an aside, is that inflammation is your immune system. It's not actually a bad thing, right? So we've been taught that chronic inflammation is bad. Acute inflammation is good. Chronic inflammation is bad. Chronic inflammation is not bad, in and of itself. It is trying to solve your problem. It is not the problem, but it does cause your symptoms. So the symptoms are the chronic inflammation, which is the solution to your problem. It's trying to root out the problem that's there. It's trying to get rid of toxins from cells or infection inside or around cells, whatever. It's trying to clean things up, and it's unable to, usually because the tissue or the immune system has become too weak and the infections become too strong. So it's kind of a stalemate. That's what happens in chronic disease. And the only reason you get to that point is because you've inhibited your immune system over and over again when the problem was much smaller from taking care of that problem. And so the problem got so big that the immune system isn't strong enough anymore to fight it off. So hopefully people understand that. So yeah, Malungu bark, I first heard about it from somebody and tried it at that time months ago, probably 6 months ago. There was only a powdered bark available, just a whole herb, powdered bark, Malungu, and that didn't mix well with water with anything. But it's best to take it in water. So I would just kind of like stir it up and drink it real quick before it got a chance to settle down. And I found that it worked. It had a really fast onset. Within 5 minutes, if you laid down, you would just feel more relaxed and sleepy than you would otherwise. If when I In the beginning, I tended to overdo things. So I started having headaches, and I realized after a couple of days that this was a side effect of Malungu. So when something's that powerful, it will have side effects if you overshoot the dose. It can lower your blood pressure. It might affect your blood sugar. Might make you feel lightheaded, because of the lowering blood pressure effect. But all things that, if you get the right dose, then usually you'll have the effect, rapid onset, if you take it in water, without side effects. So, when I lowered the dose, I had the exact same effect without the headaches. So you need to understand that you start off very low and you gradually increase it, and you could use it as needed for anxiety, and just like literally just like a few minutes before you want to go to sleep, if you dump the capsules into water. And so what we did is we tried to find something that would be easier to use, so we and and that you could put into a capsule and still get a good dose. So we found the highest strength extract we could. So basically it's a 20-to-1 extract. So you take the herb and you get rid of like 19 parts out of 20, and you're left like all the inactive, like the cellulose fibers and stuff like that. You get rid of all the kind of inactive stuff, and you're left with all of the active kind of herb, but full spectrum. So you're not just focusing on one, enzyme or sorry, not enzyme, one chemical or other, but you're getting the full effect of the herb. Is just similar to what you would get with a tincture or something, right? So you've taken out all of the active principles, but you've left all the ratios and everything. Everything is intact. You just don't have the filler, right? So that allows it to dissolve well in water. So I would recommend dumping the capsule into water, and trying it that way, and going from there, and see, if you have an issue, then see how it works. Most I would say, on this topic, maybe like 90% of mood problems like anxiety, depression, all this stuff are linked to light. Okay, your light environment and sleep as well. Like 90, 95%, maybe even 100%. I mean, they're so like what I meant by 90% was like 90% of the kind of like pathogenesis might be traced directly to light environment, and then maybe 10% due to everything else, right, that could possibly cause those problems, which is way different than most people imagine, right? Most people don't even account for their light environment where they're thinking about, like, why do I have bipolar disorder or some other mood disorder? Why do I have insomnia? Oh, it must be because this, that, all the different, laundry list of items that we think of. But the more you learn about light, which I have been learning about the last 6 months, the more you realize that it has like an overwhelming effect on your physiology. So I've published a couple of articles at blog.mygotodoc.com on this topic, but there's a whole lot more to it. I mean, there's just like so much that light does, and every wavelength in light has a different beneficial effect. And some of them, if you isolate them, like UVB, you can create a harmful effect when it's taken out of its natural context of full spectrum sunlight, as it is when in a lab setting or something, when they're trying to study the effects of UVB. So full spectrum sunlight, if you get it throughout the day, if you get some in the morning, some in the afternoon, some in the late afternoon, will protect you from the damaging effects of the sun because of the infrared wavelengths and the UVA. So UVA triggers nitric oxide, which dilates blood vessels. And the infrared will actually have this anti-inflammatory effect, which is protective against some of the harmful effects that can be there with UVB. But UVB also has a lot of beneficial effects. So you need UVB. It's necessary. It's a necessary nutrient to trigger POMC, which cleaves into a lot of prohormones and hormones. So, I mean, there's chemicals from POMC. So this is kind of a pre-hormone, which is cleaved into 10 other hormones that stabilize your mood, give you a better mood, make you happier, give you motivation and focus, and just like all kinds of stuff, right? And then the other issue with light environment is that, so number one, people aren't getting enough sunlight, so they're not triggering as much of all these things during the day that they need. Their serotonin, their dopamine, their adrenaline, their cortisol, their insulin, like all these things are supposed to be there during the day. And then at night, you're not supposed to have any, those things. They're supposed to be very low. So it's kind of a circadian rhythm, right? There's a curve. You have a high level during the day and then low level at night, and then high level the next morning and low level at night. And at night, other things are supposed to be high, like melatonin, obviously, and growth hormone, and some other things that are like rest and recovery and rebuilding and detoxing, and, those kind of things that trigger those things. And when we leave the lights on after dark, at all, you're cutting in because you're not allowing those hormones to flip on, and you're triggering too much of the daytime hormones. So you're burning through like too much of your daytime fuel, and you're overtaxing all those organs that create those daytime hormones, including thyroid hormone. And I mean, there's a bunch more, sex hormones, et cetera. And so you have too much of those, you've overtaxed the organs that made those, and you got too much of those, and then you have too little of the nighttime stuff. And so this creates mood disorders, it creates chronic disease, it creates insulin resistance, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, kidney disease, any disease, you name it, boils down to this, right? So your light is a super drug, okay? It's even better than exercise. I mean, there was a study showing shining infrared light on the skull, so it penetrates the skull. Shining infrared light on a person was more effective for like dementia symptoms, for maybe not dementia symptoms. I need to go read the study, but more effective for boosting brain function essentially than anything else, including exercise, which is like the number one touted, like, if this was in a pill, it would be a $1 trillion pill. It would solve all our problems. So you have to understand the way pharmaceutical propaganda works is they are very happy telling you to do things like exercise that almost no one's going to be willing to do, the hard stuff, okay? And they don't like to tell you about stuff that is pretty easy to do, like replacing all the vegetable oils in your diet with just natural fats. You could literally eat exactly the same foods you were eating before, just without the vegetable oils in them, and you would be way ahead of everyone who's eating the vegetable oils. I mean, eventually you would probably solve a lot of your issues. And it's the same with the light environment. So it is, you have to change things a bit. There's degrees of it, like the first degree would be you wear blue blocker glasses at night religiously until you go to bed. Still, you're going to get non-visual photoreceptors on your body that are not in your eye being affected by the light, and it's still going to be triggering a lot of your problems. It's just going to be a little bit less because you're blocking it with in the eyes themselves, which are very sensitive. But still, it's like your whole body is kind of an eye. You're not able to sense the light when it's hitting your body, but you can sense it when it hits your eye. Or at least most people can't sense it when it hits their body, but your body can sense it, right? And the hormones are still activated by the light hitting your body. So step 2 might be like covering up most of your skin, but still having regular lights. And then step 3 might be replacing all your light bulbs with red light bulbs, okay? And then step 4 would be keeping those, only buying really, really dim red light bulbs, okay? And each of these improves your hormonal situation even more. So if you keep your lights at like 50 lux and they're red or below, then you're in a pretty decent situation after dark, and it's not going to terribly affect your hormones. And then where I'm at is you just don't use the lights anymore. Maybe you throw away all your artificial lights and you use candles. So candles are very, very dim lux, and they're rich in the red and infrared range, so better. But yeah, I mean, even like moonlight, like on a full moon, there's this association with like werewolves and people going crazy, and a lot of doctors and nurses and ER people will swear that there is this effect that people go insane on the full moon. May have, in part that's probably psychological, like placebo or nocebo, like you expect it to happen, you expect to see it, and so you see what you expect, and people might expect it to happen and it might happen to them or whatever. And there might be magnetic effects, right, on the human brain for sure. And then, but a part of that is probably, at least historically, part of it was probably explained by the bright blue light of the moon affecting people's physiology. Except nowadays, we have that bright blue light, even brighter blue light than that all the time. So our baseline craziness has gone up, right? So, and baseline disease levels have gone up because of this kind of full moon effect, right? All the time in everyone, everywhere in the world, except for traditional cultures that don't have electricity yet. So, we take more care of the the spawning turtles in our country than we do of human beings. Places where they'll be crossing the road, they'll have like red street lights instead of the regular white ones. So really, there should be red lights everywhere. It should be a red light district across the planet for human beings' benefit. The white light is just harmful to us, and we need to wake up to that. So, but yeah, where you end up at the end of that little rabbit hole is you really don't need lights. You live during the day, right? You start to realize that if you follow natural laws, you will be healthy. You are subject to natural laws, all right? You cannot escape them. You are a slave to them, all right? You are a being that is a contingent being that requires its environment to be healthy. So you're not a god, okay? That's, newsflash, right? For people. You didn't bring yourself into existence. You can't choose when you're going to die. You can't choose to disregard the rules of your existence and your nature. And so one of those natural laws is the sun rises, it's time to do things, it's time to eat things, it's time to consume things like light and information and etc. Sun goes down, it's time to stop doing all that, it's time to rest, sleep, pray, maybe whisper with a loved one, whatever, do things that are the opposite of that daytime activity. And if you follow that natural law and others, you will be healthy. That's just the way it works, okay? And if you don't, you will be sick. And your mood will be disordered. All right, so we got some comments here. Valerie says, I've heard charcoal absorbs not only toxins, but good substances like minerals, vitamins, herbal compounds. Yeah. And how much can you take safely in milligrams without running into an issue of depleting the good stuff in your system, especially if you're supplementing quite a bit to help with your recovery from long COVID? The reason for taking the charcoal tablets is to deal with the pain and toxins from a reoccurring tooth abscess. So the best way to treat a tooth abscess is to bite with that tooth on a clove, or like 3 or 4 cloves even, and just bite down, and within like minutes, the pain will be gone and probably will stay gone. If you do this for a few days, like a few times a day for a few days, the abscess will just be gone. If that doesn't work, you bite on a clove of garlic. Okay, so number one was those black little cloves that look like I don't know, like a little club, like a little tiny mini club with a little ball on top that can fall off. So you bite on those, and incredibly effective. But if that doesn't work, you go and get a fresh clove of garlic, peel a fresh clove of garlic, and maybe cut, like, depending on how big your cloves of garlic are, maybe cut like a half or a third, and then bite down with that on the tooth. Bite down with the tooth, the affected tooth. Bite down with that, on the clove like that, and again, within like 2 or 3 minutes, pain gone, infection gone. Repeat it like 3, 4, 5 times a day for a few days, and problem solved. No pain, no infection, everything's back to normal. So there's that. And the charcoal, is helpful for removing toxins, obviously. So the way I look at it is you just have to increase the nutrient density of your diet, because you will lose some. Okay, the charcoal is going to suck it out of your blood. All right. In order to try to like diminish that effect as much as possible, maybe you can take it last thing at night before going to bed, hours after your last meal and your last supplement, your last everything. Let it do its magic at night, but it's still, again, going to be sucking stuff even out of your blood, into the lumen of your intestine and out of your body. So it's a trade-off. You got to get rid of the toxins. It's going to take out some nutrients. Once the toxins are gone, you rebuild all the nutrients that you need. So this is just the way that it works with anything, not just charcoal, but chlorella or any other thing, zeolite, whatever thing you use to help you detox, it's going to work the same way. Is it okay to just let go and stop eating? 4+ years of this and I can't take it. Is it okay to just let go and stop eating? 4+ years of this and I can't take anymore. I don't have the rest of the comment. It's usually okay to just stop eating. I wouldn't recommend just letting go of life for sure. But Anis, can you post the whole comment? So yeah, I mean, I'll check on Twitter. Hold on, give me a second, guys. So I mean, yeah, most people, almost everyone, can like go without eating for a long time. You got a lot of extra fat, and eventually, you'll switch over to fat burning. The issue with it is that most people, like 99 point something percent, most people, almost everyone in the United States and in most westernized countries, in all industrialized countries, is probably insulin resistant. And what that means when you're insulin resistant is that you can't utilize your fat very well to make fuel. And some people have trouble switching over from burning sugar to burning fat. And it's a struggle, it's a process, and it can take a while to get into creating ketones and burning ketones. So you can track it, you can get a ketone strip and see if you're making ketones. And if you're not, then that you're not burning your fat, you're actually burning your muscle. Okay, so there's a tiny amount of sugar storage called glycogen. Once you burn through that, the only other way to make sugar really is to grab your protein from your muscle and convert it into sugar, and until you're able to use fat. So the reason most people can't use fat and they're insulin resistant is because their fat is full of highly toxic vegetable seed oil, which it's basically a really dirty fuel that burns very, very dirty and destroys. It's like if you had a factory that was trying to burn fuel and create electricity for your country, and the fuel itself was exploding and creating all this smoke and killing all the workers, and like you're constantly having to like rebuild the factory at the same time as you're extracting the energy from the dirty fuel. I mean, it's insane, right? So it's a situation that's intolerable to your mitochondria, which make the kind of energy currency of your body. And so they can't use that fuel unless that's the only thing left, right? Which means that you've burned through like all of the muscle that you can possibly burn through. So this is a bad situation. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and so that's the issue with going to not eating at all, no calories, is that sure, like you can survive and you'll lose some fat, and certainly you're not going to only burn muscle. So you'll burn muscle and fat, but too much muscle, way too much muscle. You don't want to burn muscle, but unfortunately you will. One way, maybe, this is theoretical, to shift the burning towards the direction of fat is actually to not drink water, to do a dry fast. Although you can't do that forever, right? So I've known people who did it for 6-7 days, which is a lot longer than people imagine it's possible to stay alive without water. And the reason is, the key is that any fuel that you burn, sugar, protein, fat, will liberate water. Okay, so while your mitochondria are burning it, they give off water, right? It's kind of like I think it's hydrogen fuel, right? And it's basically that, right? The mitochondria use electrons, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they create water. So they create what's called metabolic water from the fuel. So they take your food, the protein, carbs, fat, whatever it is that they're burning, ketones, and they basically, your body basically turns that into electrons, protons, and oxygen. And then those feed into your mitochondria, and the output is ATP and water, and CO2. So you get water out of those fuels themselves. That's it's awesome, right? So you breathe out CO2, and you urinate out the water. So that's where the fat, that's where your weight goes. It goes into CO2 in your breath and water in your urine, and those are the two waste products of burning anything. But you get the most water. You get way more water from from natural fats than you do from the other fuels, and especially certain saturated fats. You get like double as much water as you do from other fats. And so the quality of your fat makes a huge difference in how long you can go without drinking water. But my point here is that if you're not drinking water and your body needs more water, that would seem to be a situation where it would prefer the fuel. It would rather burn the fuel that gives it the most water per gram burned of fuel. So for this reason, people have theorized that dry fasting might be the most efficient way to lose fat specifically, and instead of protein and muscle. So, but there's a limit. You got to do it carefully. You got to make sure you're okay. Don't go home and kill yourself dry fasting for a month. It's not possible for most people. So probably the limit for most people is going to be, 6 days, 7 days. And even that may not be possible for a lot of sick people who are very insulin resistant. It's just may not happen. So I'm not recommending, this is not medical advice, because it's, I used to cringe when people said, oh, this is not medical advice, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, it is. but it's true. It can't be. It's just literally impossible for it to be medical advice, because medical advice really has to be individualized to a specific situation. And people will ask me a question, like a 3-line question, and all the information I need to give the exact advice for that situation is not present. It's just not there. So I can make like a million assumptions and say, something about that question, but it involves a million assumptions in the back of my mind about the person, that this, assumed situation that I'm talking about. Doesn't really reflect the question. So it's really more, you're learning something and maybe getting some information, and then you have to think about it carefully and check it with somebody else who knows something in order to apply it in your own life. So let me see if I got the whole question. And it's Dana Marie Wortman, the second question, it got cut off. I don't see the whole thing. Then next, but let me see on Twitter if I can check out my Twitter feed. Maybe it's in there. Anyway, while I'm looking here, no, I don't think it's in Twitter. It must be on Facebook. Okay. Eventually, I think he'll get around to posting it for me. Is it okay to just let go and stop eating? 4+ years of this, I can't take it anymore. My body doesn't want food. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that I don't know. Again, this is one of those questions I would need a lot more information, right? So you could just be depressed. It might not, So I don't know. If you're really, fed up and ready to get better and ready to roll up your sleeves and do some work, then see my partner Hakeem Shabazz. He can fix you. I mean, I'm so certain that he can fix people that I'm almost to the point where I'm gonna start offering people like a 100 or even 200% money back guarantee if they don't get better within 6 months. And that would include everything that person spent on getting better that we recommended specifically, like all the supplements and not the food, but everything short of like what we recommend eating. So all the supplements and herbs and even materials and supplies and stuff that we specifically recommend that you buy and use, like a juicer and stuff. This is my idea. You guys let me know if this is a good idea. It's like invest in yourself, double your money back, or lose your disease, basically, right? So spend 6 months, invest in yourself, and you would have to do everything that's recommended. It's not going to be easy. I guarantee you it's going to be difficult to do every single thing to the letter for 6 months. But if you do it, I'm so certain that your problem will be like probably gone, but I could probably guarantee like 80% better, 90% better, maybe within 6 months for like the vast majority of people. So it's upsetting when people don't get better because that they didn't do what they were told to do. They would have gotten better. And this is because it's based on higher principles. It's based on things like if you want to build a rocket that flies and you don't understand physics, the physics, like Newtonian physics, you don't understand it, your rocket's not going to fly. Okay. You're not going to be able to design it. And it's the same with medicine. If you don't understand the principles upon which the body works and upon which nature works, the ecological principles, etc., then you can't design something that's going to make the person better because you have no idea what you're doing. You're just like fumbling around in the dark. You're doing the wrong thing. You're worsening the situation. You're like focusing on symptoms when you should be focusing on root causes. But when you do understand the deep principles, and you have experience with a lot of people who followed your recommendations to the letter because they had no other choice. They were, stuck between a rock and a hard place. They literally had no other choice but to do this or die. Then you can develop a program or a system which will work for anyone, and it'll work. Like that it works. The person just has to do it. So, all right. You can find him at mygotodoc.com/Hakeem if you're ready to get better and you're ready to do the work. Alinda Mahamo says, one, best way to detox from scans. I've had 8 scans, VQ scan, MRI scan, CAT scan, with and without contrast, 8 scans since June 11th. And 2, what kind of ivermectin is best? I'm taking currently a compounded liquid, 3.2 ml once a day for COVID, or is the pill better? I don't think it really matters, pill or liquid, whatever kind of compounded form you get. I would prefer not to buy anything from overseas because I don't think they're trustworthy at all when it's coming directly from overseas, like India or China. If people get raw materials and compound them in the United States, I don't think it matters where they come from because that is like export quality stuff. And, that gets checked, enters into this like regulatory regime at the FDA. And even though the FDA is not perfect, it gets way better than its counterparts in India and China. So I would only trust stuff compounded in the United States or made in the United States or like, put together at least in the United States after going through some checks and balances. So these countries like India, Pakistan used to be a part of India, China, most of the third world countries, their export quality stuff, their export, the factories that export, they actually go above and beyond the FDA to make sure that their stuff is top quality so that they don't lose their, supply chain, contacts and their ability to sell their product into the international market. So they actually will show you all of the independent tests and everything. And that's good quality stuff. And what they sell in their own country doesn't go through those requirements, and it is not the same. And people in those countries know that it's not the same, and they prefer not to buy the stuff that's available inside their own country. And yet they can't get the export quality from their own country. So they literally have to buy stuff made in India from outside of India, imported back into India. And that's unfortunate, but it's just the way it is because those factories, they won't sell in India. Even though they're Indian factories or Chinese factories, they don't sell within their own country. They sell into the export market, which makes them a lot more money. And they just sell like the leftover junk, trash, whatever that, they'll sell the leftovers into their own market. This is the way it works. So that's why I don't recommend buying anything direct. And usually, like nowadays, it's not even cheaper. It's actually cheaper to just buy in the US. I would prefer a fish medicine in the US to, a human medicine, without a prescription from India or China, or even with a prescription. So that answers that one. How best to detox from scans? So there's two things. One is the radiation that you got exposed to. You just got exposed. That's like a hit to your body, and you just recover from it. So you just try to avoid another radiation hit. Just avoid them. I would not get radiation. Basically, that's my answer to that. Don't do it anymore. And then maybe help yourself to avoid other non-native electromagnetic fields that are present in your local environment. So get the detox electromagnetic EMF kind of like EMF mitigating cream prescription, and rub your whole body with that, and turn off the Wi-Fi at night. So I'll drop the link here in the chat, and maybe Anis can just send it to everyone else. That's the EMF cream link to how to make it, and some links to some of the research that shows that the rosemary and the bee propolis especially have been shown to protect against electromagnetic fields. The other thing that protects against all the electromagnetic fields is a tan. Okay, so the melanin that creates a tan, this is one reason why you should get a tan everywhere, even tan throughout your entire body, like even your perineum. Okay, perineal sunning, go look it up. You want a tan everywhere. If you're like a guy and you have erectile dysfunction, sun that area and you won't anymore. So, and if you still do, then do some Kegels and you won't. So perineal sunning plus sunning everywhere. So just get tan everywhere. That melanin absorbs every wavelength of electromagnetic radiation, good, bad, whatever, everything gets absorbed. So it's like a shield on your body. That's the only real natural shield. And if you don't do that, then you'll probably have fungal overgrowth throughout your entire body, because fungus also absorbs electromagnetic fields and radiation. So so if you don't have a tan, go and put that cream on until you have a really good tan, and then still even maybe put the cream on just so you're like the melanin will absorb it, but I don't know, maybe you don't want it absorbing it, like and maybe it can't absorb 100% of it, right? So, it probably can't. We're just exposed to too much. So there are biological effects that have been shown in the research to every non-native electromagnetic field and native ones. So good biological effects come from the native Schumann resonances, the Earth's native electromagnetic field. And harmful ones come from a unnatural electromagnetic field that we're not designed for, either by, regardless which one you believe, whether it's nature or, evolution or intelligent design by God. Either way, you can just assume that we're not designed for it. It's going to harm us. It disrupts calcium ion channels and does a lot of other stuff that's proven. Okay. And then getting rid of the contrast, right? So your body has to detox the contrast, and that's something that takes time. Detoxing something, like, it's a lot easier to inject it into your vein than it is to get it out of your body. It doesn't come out that quickly. There's channels for it to be released, and those channels can only handle so much at one time in one day, and so it's a process. It takes time. It can take a really long time. So you want to try to avoid as much as possible, but there's different ways of doing it. The natural ways, like the activated charcoal and the chlorella and all of that stuff. It's going to be a long-term kind of project, but you can definitely get started and feel a lot better. But you need somebody to oversee this kind of thing, like my partner Hakeem Shabazz. It's not something that, like, 99.999% of people really can't do it themselves. Even if you know everything that you're doing, right? You know everything about it. Let's say you know everything Hakeem Shabazz knows, right? You still probably can't do it for yourself, because people just they deceive themselves, right? Like, it's very hard to treat yourself, which is why in every discipline, in the past, at least the ancients, no one really trusted somebody who was self-taught entirely, right? So you focus on things that you like and you prefer, and so you need some guidance from somebody who's unbiased and who's looking at you in an unbiased way, and who can tell you and advise you and say, hey, you need to focus on this area that you're not as good at as that other. Like, you're good at that, you like that, you tend to go towards that, you need to focus on this other thing in order to become balanced. So studying and teaching, you'll get the best effect when some unbiased ego is in charge of your own biased ego, telling you which way to go. And the same thing with anything, with any endeavor. It helps to have a truly wise person giving you guidance, even if you already know everything. So it's really, in every field of human improvement, right? Like whether it's becoming a basketball player, whether it's physical sports, whether it's mental, gymnastics, whether it's, the math Olympiad, it doesn't matter whether it's spiritual progress, whatever, right? Whether it's emotional progress, like any field of human endeavor, if you want to do it well, you need to have a wise teacher to give you guidance. And, the same with your health. Okay, I had no idea there was an ENF cream. Is there a certain detox you recommend? Yeah, so basically, you just put the cream on all the time, especially for anyone under the age of 30, whose myelin sheaths may not be fully formed yet. I mean, I had no idea it goes on in some people until 30s, which is insane. So the nervous system is not fully, formed and fully protected by myelin sheaths until some people when they reach their early 30s. So children are going to be the most sensitive to this, and their just nervous system won't develop properly, unfortunately, when they're exposed to non-native EMFs. So you want to just slather it all over the body of children and turn off the Wi-Fi at night and turn off the cell phones at night. Get a flashlight and get an alarm clock, and don't use your cell phone for that, right? Like just turn off the cell phone, brick it, put it in a different room, turn off and put it in a different room, because I still think the cellular signal is still hitting your phone. There's still a little bit alive in there. It's still going to be able to track you. It's still going to be able to hear you, probably. Who knows, right? I don't think it ever really shuts off, right? Even when you turn it off until you drop it in. Even if you drop it in a bucket of water, it doesn't get bricked anymore, right? Like they're mostly waterproof now. You have to destroy it with a hammer in order to be sure that it's off. So anyway, do the best you can. Turn it off. Put it really far away from you in a different room. And you can plug it in when it's off, but in a different room. And have an alarm clock or a couple of alarm clocks and a little pen light or something that's red, preferably, to get around and to wake up. And what else? I mean, that's basically it. Try to, if you can, if you're choosing where to live or move, take along one of these EMF sensing devices, look up those things and check the environment and make sure that it's not you're not underneath a high power line or something, and you're not, in between 17 cell phone towers, so try to get, your distance away from those things. The harm drops off dramatically by distance. So the further you are from anything that's creating EMF, the less bad it is. If you're building a house, try to have a kill switch for the whole house, except for the fridge, for example, so that you don't have any electricity running through your walls while you're sleeping. So there's a lot of things you can do. Obviously, not everyone can do most of them, but or all of them, but you can do a lot. And then, I mean, the protocol really for the cream is just to use it as much as possible to protect yourself from EMFs, and at the same time, go and get a tan. So check out my blog.mygotodoc.com. One of the recent blogs, I was talking about safe tanning. I think it was the Food Is Not What You Think blog. Midway through that, there's a little section on, even if you're Fitzpatrick type 1, lily white skin tone, you can still safely tan. You can train your body to become tan. You might need to change your diet, get rid of the seed oils, eat fatty fish, and there might be a couple of supplements you can take, and then you have to get early morning sun, late afternoon sun, and then a little bit of midday sun, and work your way up, and that'll help you to safely tan. Lauren Marie says, does it matter what type of ivermectin is taken? Can it be, oh yeah, we already got this one, slow release or extended? Yeah, it can be, but it doesn't have to be, because all ivermectin is kind of ends up being slow release. It goes into your tissues pretty fast, but then it stays in your tissues for a really long time and slowly leaks out. So But yeah, I mean, in terms of keeping it in your bloodstream longer, then slow release would work for keeping your bloodstream longer. So yeah, that would help if you need high bloodstream levels for an acute infection. Slow release might be beneficial, and it might not actually. So I don't know that the research has been done on this. I don't know the answer, because slow release means that you're going to get a certain blood level continuously, and immediate release means you're going to get a big spike in the blood level, and then it's going to go down. And so the big spike might be better than a slow release of a certain, quantity for a long period of time. So I don't know. The spike would, you know, but if the slow release levels get to the point of viral inhibition in the bloodstream and stay there, then it would be fine. So I don't know. It would depend on, we would have to do some work to figure that out, and I don't know that we have the data to be able to figure that out, unfortunately. I'm not sure. Maybe if anyone knows, let me know. I don't know the answer. What we do know is that the immediate release works fine, but it's possible the slow release would be better. I just don't know. Clutch sport, and it's possible slow release would be worse. So the safest thing would seem to be to stick with the immediate release for an acute infection. For chronic, maybe even the immediate release might be better there too, because with chronic, you probably don't have bloodstream issues, so it probably wouldn't matter actually. And either way, and again, the precautionary principle would say just use what people know works, which is immediate release. But there probably is no reason to suggest that the slow release would be any worse in a chronic situation, because the target is the tissues, not the bloodstream. All right, so do you have a protocol that you can order if you happen to get COVID again, to be prepared instead of going to the local doctor and them telling you there is nothing they can do about it? Yeah, absolutely. This is like the number one thing that we offer at My Go To Doc, basically. mygotodoc.com, mygotodoc.com. Check it out, and you can get a protocol to keep on hand for any situation: bioterror attack, COVID, whatever, anthrax, etc. Even there's a protocol for Marburg, Ebola, stuff like that. And you can get the meds and keep it in your medicine cabinet, which is probably the best thing to do in our current situation. If you want to, you need to treat some of these things right away. You can't wait. Waiting just, it doesn't work as well. Any updates on progress for patients with unstable blood sugar? Seems like meds don't really make much of a difference. It just does what it wants to. I have a patient now on 2 different meds not working. This is Amy Duff. It has low lows and high highs. It's just potluck every day. Yeah, so I think the number one thing that I would try to get them to change is their light environment. Try to get them outdoors most of the day, but definitely like 30 minutes from sunrise onwards, 30 minutes before sunset until sunset, and in direct sun and with grounding, and during the sun exposure, and then work their way up to 30 minutes at least midday. And this fixes all hormones, right? So it fixes cortisol, insulin, it fixes metabolic disease. And so that's number one. The sun is incredibly powerful. You can't just use photobiomodulation. I mean, like, you'll get some benefits from infrared and near infrared, but you're not getting all the other benefits of every other hormone that you get from the sun, right? It's a package deal. You need all the wavelengths, and you just can't replicate it. You can buy like a sun lamp and a UVA lamp, maybe the sun lamps have, I think they just have UVB, but you could get a UVA lamp and an infrared and a near infrared and a full spectrum light and all this stuff, and you still wouldn't be able to match the intensity and the efficacy of just going outdoors, right? Like, thank God we're not at the point where you can't just go outside and get sunlight, right? They haven't yet blocked out the sun, right? We're not in the Matrix movie yet, not yet, at least, although they're trying to get us there. So what else? I mean, obviously there's herbs, but the number one thing is no light at night, light during the day from sunlight, and no light at night. Don't sit inside getting light through window glass. It's going to, raise your cortisol more and not have anything to offset it. And you're going to have probably blood sugar issues. So you need to go outside in the sun and throughout the day. Meds, I wouldn't even use meds. I would try to taper off meds, because they're just not physiologically fine-tuned, right? So they're always, you're gonna, that's the problem. Probably one of the problems for this up and down is like the medication forces it down, and then it overshoots, and then there's a rebound back up, and it's just the problem. A lot of the problem might be the medication management trying to solve the problem, so creating more of a problem. So this, you often see with medications, that you get more of a problem than you fix. You don't actually fix problems with medications. You mitigate them. You mitigate the symptoms without fixing the underlying issue. So you don't address the underlying cause, and sometimes it's just impossible to fine tune the medication the way that the body's the pancreas would fine tune the release of insulin. So no seed oils, strictly no seed oils. Eat saturated fat, and probably get rid of, wean off carbs. Just go into like fat and protein, but leaning towards the fat. So high fat, low protein, and very, very low carb. And then no seed oil at all. Sun during the day, no light at night. And most people, this will fix it, especially with the grounding, if they do the grounding. So the longer you do the grounding, probably the better. There's effects that build up for like, over the, like you would think that, okay, electrons are flowing into me, it's just like gonna happen, boom, they're there, they're all there. But it continues because electrons flow in, they neutralize oxidative stress, and there's still more oxidative stress, more electrons flow in, and it just continues to be beneficial. It's like it's an antioxidant effect, and it continues to benefit you. There was one study showing a benefit going even into 30 minutes. And so, yeah, this reminds me, there was a study showing that the blood sugar response to a oral glucose tolerance test was 30% lower when they shined infrared light on the person's back. So infrared light makes up like over 50%, or sorry, red and infrared makes up over 50% of sunlight. So you just need to go outside. I guess you could take your shirt off and shine a red light panel or near infrared light panel on your back every time you eat. But again, you're just not going to get all the benefits of the sunlight that you're going to get. And probably the effect would have been even better, even more profound, if they had just gone in the sun. Because again, the intensity and the spectrum, right? Like those lamps create like an artificially concentrated spectrum. You don't get the whole spectrum that's beneficial. So hopefully that helps. All right, Liana Urbach Patterson says, what's MDT? I don't know. Does anyone know what MDT is? Google. Multi-drug therapy, maybe, is what you're talking about. Multi-drug therapy is used for leprosy. That's what Google gave us, but it also for TB is the common one, multi-drug therapy. Although you could also maybe call what you use for H. pylori multi-drug therapy. So perhaps that's what you're looking at. Susan Ritter says, I'm under the care of a rheumatologist. What can I take instead of prednisone to help control severe joint and muscle pain from polymyalgia rheumatica? My CRP was 136.5 in March and now 8.8. I started out with 30 milligrams of prednisone and I'm now down to 12.5 milligrams. So the key is to understand what's going on with polymyalgia rheumatica and every other inflammatory disease, is that you are hobbling your immune system from taking care of the problem. And the more you hobble it, the more your immune system tries to break free. And so the symptoms are the immune system. The symptoms are the solution. But once you've suppressed them that much, it can become like your immune system is trying to like break free. So it's increasing. It's like it's pushing harder and harder against the suppressive prednisone. And so if you suddenly remove the prednisone, the immune system can go wild, right? Because you've pushed it back, and then suddenly you let you remove the resistance, and it falls forward. It goes flying forward. So you have to kind of like gradually taper off these kind of things, and replace them not with like the equivalent of prednisone in herbal form, but you need to address the underlying root cause, which is you need to help your body extract the problem that it was going after in the first place. It's not a mistake. Okay, polymyalgia rheumatica. The symptoms of it are the solution to it. Okay, if that's the truth. The symptoms are trying to get rid of weak cells that have been affected by toxins and pathogens, both. And so there's probably, at this point, there might be multiple pathogens that have taken up residence in that tissue and in those cells. And a lot of toxins may have concentrated there because the tissue itself has gotten weaker, and its defenses have gotten weaker and weaker. You've allowed old dead cells on their last legs to just continue living the good life, and you have not let your immune system go and like kill them out, kill them off. You know, apoptosis has not been allowed. Phagocytosis has not been allowed. Autophagy has not been allowed. So nothing has been allowed to happen. Like proper management of an ecology has not happened, right? So it's the same situation as on the African savannah. You have like a herd of gazelles, and the weakest gazelle gets picked off by the lion. Invariably, every time. The lion doesn't want to do any extra work. It just goes and picks off the weakest, slowest gazelle. And so what that ends up doing is the entire herd of gazelles gets stronger and stronger, and they survive for, millennia. Okay. If you interfere with that situation, the species will get weaker and weaker, and eventually it'll die off. And so what you're doing at the level of your body is the same thing. It's evolutionary biology. You're weakening your body and that tissue more and more. It gets weaker and weaker. You don't let it go through its, you don't let the forest fires happen. You don't let the underbrush get burnt off. And then it's like you see the same signal in every ecology. You have to understand that this is how ancient physicians were able to cure people, is because they understood this very simple insight that analogies work in the real world. Okay, everything works the same way at every level of reality. You see the same patterns forming. Okay, so the same patterns you see in a rainforest are the same patterns you see inside us, right? So this is something else that I tried to explain in a blog that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. It's called Never Kill the Wolves, and it's a great blog. If I do say so myself, I like it. You always like the stuff that you make, and then you look at it again 5-10 years later, and you're like, cringe, total cringe. Oh my god, I can't believe I wrote that. But it's too close to me right now to see any of its flaws. So anyway, keep an eye out for that. You can go and look at the blog that's already published on autoimmune disease and vitamin D. A lot of the information is basically there, but I just try to make the same point in different ways until people get it. But yeah, you'll see the same problem with forest fires, the same problem with herds of gazelles, the same problem in rainforests, the same problem in the deep south with the pathogenic, what is that plant that got introduced, kudzu. See the same. So what happens is in ecology, you can have a super pathogen come in from outside, like totally outside that environmental unit. And so you are a unit with your environment, right? And your body ecology is made up of your own cells. You could maybe call that like the earth and the trees. And then there are millions of other cells in you too. Then you could call those like the underbrush and the microbes and the fungi and all this other stuff, right? So you can look at it at whatever level you want, at the microscopic level, at the macroscopic level. You could look at Yellowstone, where they decided, let's kill off all the wolves, and there was all of these knock-on effects, really incredible if you read about it, all the different effects that it had that ended up, so certain large animals, were they antelope or something? I don't remember. Buffalo, maybe. The buffalo and antelope and deer populations grew because they were no longer being killed by the wolves, and they overgrazed these trees and shrubs on the edges of rivers and streams. And so those trees and shrubs were important for maintaining the bank of the rivers and streams. And so once they started kind of like being overgrazed and dying off, and the root systems got weakened and fewer, the banks became less able to keep in the streams. And so the streams started to spread out. The banks were not as coherent anymore. The streams spread out. The directions, their directions changed. They became shallower, and their routes changed. They altered. They became more kind of like going around in this wavy pattern instead of like more direct. And so, like, on the surface of it, if you had asked anyone, like, is there any possible connection between the wolves and the directions of the streams and the rivers in, the entire Yellowstone Park, most people would have been like, "Are you crazy? Like, are you kidding me? I mean, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense." And the same thing, prevails in your own body. The same situation. You make these little changes, and you think, "Oh, it's not a big deal. I'll just put in, I'll just lower the blood pressure, or I'll kill off H. pylori, or I'll do whatever, and no big deal." And then you realize later that H. pylori actually protects against, gastroesophageal cancer, and, some patients, and other serious disorders that are even worse than, gastritis. And really, the problem with peptic ulcers, like, sure, if you completely destroy your natural environment, and you don't have proper sunlight, and you get too much light at night and too much indoor lighting, and you're under a ton of stress, and you're smoking and you're drinking and you're doing all this other stuff, yeah, you're going to get a peptic ulcer. And maybe you can solve the problem by killing off H. pylori, but H. pylori is not the cause of the disease. It's like one tiny factor. When it's in its natural context, it doesn't cause disease, right? And it actually protects you. It's been with human beings for thousands of years. When you take it out of its natural context and put it in a completely alien environment, then yeah, it could be one of those things that you could hack the disease by removing H. pylori, and yet cause other problems later. The person might get cancer of the esophagus later because they don't have H. pylori, because it's protective against that. So this is really, this example, I can like extend this. This is the way all of modern medicine works. It always works like this. It exchanges a smaller problem for a bigger one. It always creates a bigger problem because it's a hack. It's not a solution. It's not fixing the underlying root cause of the problem. It's not fixing the underlying root cause of why the person had a peptic ulcer in the first place. It wasn't the root cause was not because they had H. pylori. The root cause was all the other changes to their natural environment. That was what led to led to the peptic ulcer. So I hope that's clear. I mean, the same kind of thought process applies to everything in modern medicine, literally everything. So getting back to polymyalgia rheumatica, go see Hakeem Shabazz, mygotodoc.com/Hakeem. He will help you to gradually wean off, gradually remove the toxins and the pathogens that have come in, that have been allowed in. And getting back to the kudzu, there are some pathogens, and this is ancient understanding as well, again, based on just the natural environment, looking at it, that there are some pathogens that are very, very, very powerful, right? Like kudzu, introduced to the American South, is so powerful, nothing in the natural environment could keep it in check, right? So it's an alien species brought into a perfectly working ecosystem that completely disrupted it. So the same thing can happen in a human being. You can get exposed to a super pathogen that overwhelms your natural processes, the natural ability of your body. But at the same time, your body has so much intelligence that the things it's trying to do to fight off the pathogen, you shouldn't be obstructing those things, okay? You should be supporting them. You should actually help the body fight off the pathogen. And what we do is we mistake all the things the body is doing for the problem itself. Because the things the body is doing, and again, the example here that really illustrates the point is the example of an enemy invading a country and infiltrating a lot of it. And then the people in that country are like, oh, well, we know there's some, bad apples and there's some enemies amongst us, but, don't root them out. It's going to be too, inconvenient for us, right? There's going to be too much damage caused to our infrastructure and stuff if you start bombing buildings and sending in strike teams, and, it's just going to disrupt everything. So don't do it. Eventually, the enemy gets bigger and bigger within your own country until it takes over your country, right? So the same thing is happening in your body. If you suppress your immune system, the immune response, yeah, you're going to feel better in the short run, right? In the short term, you'll feel fine, but in the long term, you're going to feel much, much worse, because the immune response later is going to have to be much bigger than it would have been earlier, right? And so most people have gone through a vicious cycle like this of suppressing. But as the problem escalated. They kept suppressing it at every escalatory step. And so the response to get rid of it once it's climbed that escalatory ladder is going to be much bigger and more severe. And so the physician in that situation has a really tough nut to crack, and they have to try to de-escalate the situation gradually, step by step, slowly, without overwhelming you with the severity of the symptoms. And so there's a way to do that, and it's a balancing act. It's very difficult to do it yourself. So you have to actually help remove the toxins, kill the pathogens, calm down your immune system slowly, and support. You're supporting everything your body is trying to do instead of obstructing it. Daniel says, how do I deal with long COVID autonomic dysfunction that has caused increased heart rate and higher blood pressure? Again, it's like the same answer to every question, is like go and figure out what the root causes are. Part of the root cause is definitely spike protein, maybe persistent COVID. Part of the solution might be something like ivermectin or other more broad spectrum things like chlorine dioxide, and part of the solution might be chlorella, and part of the solution will be changing your lifestyle dramatically to support all those things. So people think, oh, I can just take these things and I'll get better. That doesn't work like that. You have to put your body in the right environment. That's the base. That's the number one thing. You have to change the diet, correct the environment, and then the other things are icing on the cake. They will work, and they also have to be there, but they just don't work very well unless you've built the base with your lifestyle change and your dietary stuff. And open up the detox pathways, support the detox pathways. What are detox pathways? It's the way toxins get out of you through your gut, through your kidneys, your urine, your stool, sweat, coughing up things, nosebleeds, mucus coming out, any of these things are detox pathways. And you need to open up like lymphatics and venous supply and blood supply and all that stuff. So doing it too fast can be overwhelming and be harmful. So even though sauna will be opening up a detox pathway, it may be too soon to do it in the early stages, and you may feel a lot worse. So you got to work your way up to some of these things. For increased heart rate and higher blood pressure, in order to take the edge off, Mulungu bark might help. You can go to mygotodoc.com and you can check that out. But it's always best to have somebody managing the situation along with you. Some people will take something like Mulungu bark, take the edge off, wait a few months, 6 months, 9 months, 24 months, and their body will really slowly kind of get rid of the problem itself. So that can happen if you don't obstruct the situation anymore. And the more you do to support your body, the faster it will happen. But if you want it to happen quicker and you don't want to just take chances with waiting 24 months to see whether your body takes care of the problem on its own, then you have to consult somebody. And the best person for the truly deep natural healing is Hakim Shabazz, mygotodoc.com/Hakim, Hakim. Karen says, is any other type of anti-malarial drug efficacious as ivermectin, like Malarone? So, I mean, if you're asking about how to treat malaria, then it depends on the specific species and the location that you're going to where the malaria is. So they keep track of sensitivities to drugs for different you could say variants or species of malaria, and you just got to look it up. So there's a website where we go and check to see. Somebody says we're going to this country or this city for a week, and then we're going to this other one, and sometimes you have to change the drugs depending on where they are and which specific subtype of malaria it is and what it's most sensitive to. So there's a number of drugs that are used for malaria, chloroquine and et cetera, hydroxychloroquine and others. I'm not actually aware of ivermectin being used for malaria, so I don't think ivermectin is used for malaria. I'm pretty sure it's not. So I'm not sure. Are you asking about parasites in general? Again, the same answer applies. It depends on what parasite you're talking about. Like if you give us a certain parasite, we can look it up and see which drugs have been shown to be most effective for that specific parasite. And then, chlorine dioxide works for malaria too, and it works for pretty much everything. So it's a broad spectrum thing. And the reason it does is because uses the same system your own body does. It's kind of like a non-specific, cluster bomb for pathogens, and the same kind of chemical used by your own body. You actually uses an oxidation reaction. So oxidation is not always bad. It's sometimes good. You need oxidation and reduction. So you need both. You need redox, right? But basically what you need is a strong ability to get rid of the oxidation once it happens, right? So it happens, boom, it's like a little explosion, takes care of a pathogen, and then your body has to get rid of the oxidation. And seed oils overwhelm your body's ability to take care of oxidation because they are super oxidizers. They oxidize so much. All right. So, and you're kind of like setting a fire, and then it just spreads. It just keeps spreading. That's the problem with seed oils, is the oxidation reactions just keep going. And just to be clear, I mean, some people get confused. Olive oil is not a seed oil; it's a fruit. Olives is a fruit, so it's not a vegetable, and it's not and the oil doesn't come from the seed; it comes from the fruit pulp, not the seed. And the same goes for coconut oil comes from the flesh of the coconut, which again is not a seed; it's a nut. And avocado oil also doesn't come from the avocado seed; it comes from the flesh, the pulp. Yeah, so which oil to use, I mean, that's a different topic, but generally speaking, whatever oils your ancestors used would be the best for you. And instead of like don't be afraid of saturated fat. If your ancestors ate a lot of saturated fat, eat saturated fat. That's better for you than anything else. So generally speaking, saturated fat is fantastic, but some people may be optimized for coconut oil if all their ancestors are from a place where there's a ton of coconuts. So that's the general rule. Like, trust evolution or intelligent design, or whatever you want to call it, and don't double guess it. Don't think too hard about it. Second guess it. Sorry. All right. So the next question is Lucas. Any idea how to lower spike IgG or clear spike from the body? Ivermectin does not seem to do much in my case. Proteolytic enzymes also are not working. So, yeah. So we're not 100% sure that you have too much spike in your body, right? So how high is your spike IgG level, and what does it mean, right? Like, all I know is that in one clinic, they tracked hundreds of people, and they found that on average, people who had spike symptoms of spike disease, okay, so they had spike injury symptoms, okay, so they felt sick in some way, who also had, elevated spike IgG, as their symptoms got better, their spike IgG tended to go down. Not always, okay, tended to. On average, it went down most of the time. What that means is that maybe 80% of the time, spike IgG correlates with symptoms, right? What does that mean? That could mean that spike IgG correlates with spike levels, or it could mean spike IgG, which is actually more likely now that I think of it. The more likely situation is that spike IgG correlates with immune activation. That's what it's a sign of. Like, your immune system is creating the spike IgG. It's an immune activation, right? And there could be minuscule amounts of spike in your body, and your immune system is so shocked and frightened and worried about them that it creates a ton of spike IgG to go and bind all of them, right? Or there could be no spike IgG or there could be no spike left in your body, and your immune system is just still reacting to it because it's like, you know what, once every 3 months I get shed on and I get exposed to spike. I just need to keep this spike IgG high because it was so damaging the first time around. I want to make sure that I grab it as soon as it comes in. Or just, it's just remaining elevated, right? Like, you get a measles shot in your childhood and you still have IgG levels maybe 20 years later, right? So what does it mean? We don't know what it means. It all depends on your situation. Like, is there any other reason to think that you have spike in your body, that you're sick, that you're not optimally functioning or whatever? So unfortunately, until we can actually check spike, we don't know if you actually have spike. So there's no test for spike. In Italy, apparently they developed one in a lab, and you can urinate into a cup and they can check spike levels in your urine. But here in the US, we don't have a free spike level to check to see whether your body's excreting spike into your urine or not. All we have are these indirect tests. Do you have microclots? That would be another little piece of information that might help us decide. And even that's not perfect, because once the microclots develop, if your body can't break them down, they could have developed due to an exposure to spike 17 months ago, and your body could have gotten rid of all the spike, and you still have the microclots, and your body just needs help getting rid of them. So definitely you shouldn't have microclots. So the proteolytic enzymes, if you take enough of them, they will break down the microclots, and those will go away. But your spike IgG may never go away, right? Maybe it'll stay high, and it might not be a bad thing, or it might be a bad thing. Again, like, we don't know. So you have to try to build an understanding of what's going on based on multiple lines of evidence, and then the preponderance of the evidence shows that, like, suggests a certain situation, we go in that direction, and we try to deal with that, the problem that we think is there. All right. Question here in the live chat from third person gamer 321: is the spike protein getting worse, or is humanity getting more resilient to it? Might some people need ivermectin for the rest of their lives? Will ivermectin ever become a normal item in stores? It might, but I don't see that happening in the United States. I mean, it happened in one state, Tennessee, I think, but I'm not sure of the details of it. I don't know if you can actually walk into a store and just buy it over the counter in Tennessee or not. So I don't know that it's necessarily getting worse. There are tons of variants. The number of variants of COVID are exploding exponentially. Really alarming. But they're not so far getting more virulent, which, you can quibble about what exactly you mean by the word virulent. What I mean is, like, causing more severe disease. So that's the situation we're in right now. I don't think the spike so far has necessarily gotten any worse, but people, they can develop a resilience to it if they didn't get the shot. That's the best way to do it, because you get more of a full immune response to the whole virus. So it's not dependent on just a piece of the spike protein. It's kind of like if you had a robber break into a house and they were invisible except for the gun that they were holding, and then you asked the people who got robbed, can you describe the robber? All they would be able to describe is the gun. That's the situation with people who got the vaccine. All their immune system can describe is what kind of gun the person was holding. And if you have a lineup of a bunch of invisible people holding different guns, you're going to choose the one that's holding the gun that you saw. And despite the robber will evolve over time and carry a different, and so then you might create like a immune response in your house, that every time you see a gun floating along being carried by an invisible robber of this specific type, shoot that person or call the cops or whatever. It's the same robber back, and instead the robber brings a different gun. So I know the analogy is not perfect, it's kind of ridiculous, but at least it's something you can visualize, right? Even though it's a ridiculous cartoonish situation. So the virus evolves its gun to look different, right? And now the immune system doesn't recognize it anymore. If it changes the appearance of the gun enough, the person won't be able to pick it out of a lineup as that was the robber that robbed me. And so your immune system doesn't recognize it, right? So that's the situation essentially at a very, very super basic level in people who were vaccinated early and often. So Gert Van den Bosch thinks that if you just got one shot, if you didn't get fully vaccinated, maybe it's not as bad, and your immune system was able to kind of like get a full picture, and now it's going to be protected regardless of how much the virus evolves. And people who got 2 or more shots or full vaccine series, whatever it was, may not be able to, their immune systems may have a lot of trouble recognizing the problem. I don't think that the immune system, I mean, I don't know as much as he does about vaccinology and immunology, but I think just from a first principles basis, I don't think it's likely that the body's that brittle that you can't recover from it. And especially since the human body depends on like a lot of fail safes, right? So even if that were the situation for like just one segment of the immune system, there's a lot of other parts of your general immune response that don't depend on recognizing something. And so there's a lot of fail-safe mechanisms, right? So you don't just have one branch of an armed forces, you have several, right? You have Army, Air Force, Navy, you have, and then you have multiple branches within each one, right? So you have Navy SEALs, and you have, crewmen of destroyers, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's the same thing in your body. You also have, even your microbiome helps, and your microvirome helps. And like, you have all these other cells that are helping you fight off other things. As long as you optimize functioning, even like halfway, you should be fine. So it's really a matter of um, helping your body like have all those fail-safe systems running properly. If one system goes down, you still have 10 more. But the reason the system fails is when you destroy all the fail-safe systems. You don't just destroy one, you destroy everything. And the only reason that happens is by environmental mismanagement, right? It's an ecological problem. You have to manage your ecology, to manage your microbiome, microvirome, microfungome, micro everything all the little microbes in you, and your own cells. You have to put them in the environment that they expect, right? Which is step outdoors more often, right? As much as possible. And don't leave the lights on after dark. Don't look at screens after dark. Keep it super, super dim, right? 50 lux, go figure out what 50 lux is. It's super dim. So nightlight levels, right? We're talking about like, nightlight levels that you can't even read in, right? So you can see what's going on around you. It's red, it's a nightlight. You can get around, but you're not going to be consuming information or food or water or anything. All right. Okay, so let's see. There's another live question here. Can you provide the link for that supplement you recommend for high heart rate, blood pressure? Couldn't find your website. Yeah. So so this is my go-to stack. My go-to stack.com. It should be on the landing page. It's Malungu. Will help with heart rate and blood pressure issues both. But that's really powerful, right? So be careful with it. And then ashwagandha should help as well. It doesn't have as much of a like immediate result. Malungu is pretty immediate, so check that out. All right, so the other thing that can help is pine needle tea. So I'll have to check for the link. Let me see if I can find it. There's like, these things, you really got to get the right one, because some are way, way better than others. So there's one specific, I don't know, it might be Russian or something, manufacturer of pine needle supplements that's like way better than everyone else. And so pine needle tea and pine needle, supplements can be incredibly helpful for long COVID and vaccine injury, and should also be added. I don't know. I'm having trouble finding it. Let me see if I can. Sorry, guys. I'm just, I really want to find that supplier of pine needles. Here we go. It should be in here. It's not in there, but it should be near here. Yeah, they're from Siberia. Here we go. Can be purchased from Australia. All right. Best pine needles in the world. Coming right up. Siberian pine needles. So it's an Australian. superfoodsaustralia.com.au/product/Siberian-pine-needles is best place for pine needles. You got to titrate, play around with the dose, maybe take it 3 or 4 times a day, and it can be really helpful for some people. Stimulating the vagus nerve can be really helpful. You can do that in a number of different ways, but one way is to like stimulate your gag reflex 5 times every morning. Brush your tongue or something, scrape your tongue and try to stimulate your gag reflex 5 times. That can help a lot. So that would be something else that you might try to do for lowering heart rate and blood pressure. And just, again, like I said, get outside, get plenty of sun, no light after dark. That'll help most things get better pretty fast. And no seed oils. Avoid inflammatory foods. And do breath work. Breath work is really helpful. But probably the most helpful things are going to be the sunlight, avoiding light after dark, and then the triggering the vagus nerve is kind of it's a hack to help your body like shift back into relaxation kind of mode versus the crazy mode that it's in. But at the same time, it's not addressing always the root cause. It really should be done as part of a more comprehensive protocol, because you want to help your body get rid of the thing that's frightening it so much and raising your blood pressure and your heart rate, rather than just forcing your blood pressure and your heart rate down, right? So things like Mulungu herbs and other natural mechanisms like triggering your gag reflex, these are better than isolated pharmaceuticals or even isolated compounds from nature, because they're more they're not as highly targeted. They're not focusing on a specific like neurotransmitter or focusing on a specific on just one receptor in the body. So they have more of like a gentle and more diffuse mechanism of action. And so when you target a specific receptor, your body will just like cancel out the effect pretty quickly by removing the receptor, by making less of that receptor that's being overstimulated in its mind, right? Or in its conception of reality. Like your body is sensing things, and it's like a incredibly complicated machine that we don't even fully understand. And you're pressing a button and it's like, oh, I don't want that button pressed. I'm going to make it harder to press that button now. Okay. Because it's getting pressed too much. I'm going to remove the button. Right. So you can't press it. And that is not possible when you take much harder, or really, really not possible to do when you take an herb that has a broad-based effect on many receptors. And so anyway, it's hard to neutralize the effect of something that is a natural signal that is part of the natural environment. And so anyway, those natural signals, I mean, one way to think of them is they speak a language the body can understand, versus an alien language where you're like instead of having like a Beethoven symphony, you just focus on one note and it's just like a screechingly loud note, right? Like people would go crazy and run out of the room and try to get away from it, right? Versus having the whole symphony orchestra, carrying on the entire piece. That is like soothing and calming and relaxing, and it makes sense, right? Your body's like, oh yeah, this is nice. This is a nice relaxing situation I'm in. This is a nice relaxing signal. This is a signal that says time to relax, right? Don't worry, be happy. That's what Mulungu does, right? Mulungu sends your body an interpretable signal that says, hey, everything's cool, everything's all right, and it's interesting. Mulung is a word that means something like that in India, and yet this is from South America, so maybe there was some like cross-pollination of cultures or something involved there. All right, so hopefully that made sense. Michelle says, is there a protocol for reflux lingering 3 years after COVID? So again, I mean, we have to try to figure out what the root cause is, not just what the symptom is, because you can do a lot of things and get rid of reflux. You might be able to do something like for example, one hack for like one reason, like why is reflux there, right? It's basically there's a one-way valve. One-way valve means it opens one way and it's not supposed to open the other way, right? So if something tries to come back up, it's not supposed to let it, right? So it's supposed to be a one-way valve. It's a sphincter, actually. It's like squeezes shut. It's supposed to, that squeezing shut sphincter, right? So it's like a tube with a little squeezy muscle in the middle of that tube that shuts off the tube. So it goes from your you swallow, it goes into your esophagus, long tube, and then the esophagus connects to your stomach, and where they connect, there's a little muscle that like shuts off the connection. And that muscle, when something comes from above, the muscle is supposed to open and let it through, and then it's supposed to squeeze shut tight again and not let anything back up, right? So when you have reflux, the muscle is like not working properly anymore. It's like when there's pressure from below, it's opening up and letting the things come out, right? So from below, what does that come from, right? What like normally, even if there was pressure from below, then the muscle shouldn't open up. And the signal that tells the muscle I'm supposed to stay tightly closed is a lot of acidity in your stomach. Okay, so the esophagus normally doesn't have acid in it, and the stomach normally does. The stomach is designed to have acid. It's like a hardier environment that can withstand the acid, and the acid is necessary to break down foods and extract nutrients properly from your food and your diet. So it's supposed to be there, right? So the pharmaceutical solution is like get rid of the acid, um, and actually the problem is there's not enough acid for some reason, and that is not sending a strong enough signal to the muscle to stay shut. If there were enough acid, it would stay shut. So there's not enough acid, but there's still some acid, so there's not enough to keep it shut. So it opens a little bit, and the contents reflux, they have acid in them. That annoys the esophagus. It hurts, and then you have symptoms of reflux. Again, the pharmaceutical solution is to completely eliminate the acid, which makes this reflux actually worse, but you don't feel it because there's no acid in it anymore. There's zero acid now, right? And so while there will continue to be reflux, it'll be like going back and forth, sloshing around up into your esophagus, whatever. It just won't hurt. Okay, so that's their solution, which is ridiculous and stupid and makes no sense. A solution that makes a little bit more sense, but still as a hack, is to raise the acid by taking something like betaine hydrochloride. As long as you don't have an ulcer, that'll raise the acid in your stomach without, triggering severe pain from the ulcer. Because if there is an ulcer, that's not a hardy environment. That's an environment that will hurt when acid touches it. So you don't have an ulcer, you increase the acid with a supplement. So you're supplementing your body's inability to make enough acid for some reason, which we have not yet discovered. In this situation, like in a functional medicine situation, let's just make it function. That's the idea of functional medicine. Let's get back to normal functioning instead of, that dysfunction that pharmacy is trying to create, the pharmaceutical is creating. They're creating even more dysfunction, not less. So this is trying to correct the function, right? And so and it oftentimes does. You take the supplement, but you still have to keep taking the supplement, right? And the problem with the supplement is that, first of all, you're fixing the function of that situation, but you're not addressing the root cause, deeper dysfunction that led to that situation. Why is the stomach acid not there, right? That's the question you should be asking, and you should fix that so that the stomach acid shows up again. And secondly, what makes that worse is that when you give the stomach acid, exogenously, your body needs to make even less on its own, right? So like every natural system, like just like the lion chasing the gazelles, it doesn't want to do more work than it needs to do. If the job is already done, it's not going to do the job itself. If you give yourself thyroid hormone, your thyroid's going to be like, I'm not needed anymore. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a vacation. I'm going to retire, right? So thankfully, you can always bring it back from retirement and, send it through some exercise programs. It takes a while though, right? It's not going to go from 0 to 100 overnight. And the same, with your body and your ability to make acid. So chronic disease is, common cause of lower acidity. So you probably have continued chronic issue, creating inflammation, reducing your stomach's ability to make acid and your body's ability to make acid. There are hormones involved in making acid, like gastrin has to be secreted, and et cetera. So it's a complicated, there's feedback loops, there's all kinds of stuff that can get messed up when your body's under a lot of stress from chronic illness. And again, what is chronic illness? It is basically toxicity and pathogenicity and weakness of your body, right? The weakness from your body can come from all the mismanagement that's been going on, and the toxicity and the chronic stress of trying to deal with things, and from nutrient deficiencies. So there's a deficiency in your body, deficiency of energy production, basically, right? Mitochondrial energy production deficiency. So you're not able to, you don't have enough energy to overcome the problem, and then you have these problems that you don't have enough energy to overcome, which are the toxins and the pathogens. And almost everyone, once you start to understand the real situation and the ecology, is going to have some overgrowth of good stuff and some invasion of some bad stuff that shouldn't be there at all. And so you need to kill off the bad stuff, remove the chemical toxins and whatever, and then lower the levels of the good stuff that's overgrown, while supporting your body to do all of that. And so that's the basic answer to basically any problem that you have, but the specific details depend on the specific situation. But the approach is very, very similar to everyone, but there will be some minor, actually they're not minor, they're major. There will be some major differences. They might seem minor, like somebody might be like, oh, you give everyone like 90% the same thing to do, but it's in the 10% that fixes that specific person, right? So that's actually the most important part. The general part is not as important as the specific part, or maybe it is, right? Maybe it's more important. The general part may be as important. But the problem that people run into is that when you start going down the true path of healing, there will be some detox reactions, and most people get so frightened by them that they just stop and they go back down the usual way, because it's been pounded into them. It's ingrained so deeply into people, a certain flawed approach and fundamental misunderstanding of what's going on, that they have a lot of difficulty. Like I try to say it over and over again in different ways, and people, it doesn't really click until they've heard it like 100 times, and then you say it one more time in a certain way, and then they're like, oh, okay, and then they can generalize it to every situation. So that's hopefully what a lot of people are learning to do by listening to me, is to like generalize the answer to every situation that they're exposed to. So yeah, the hacky solution that is not a perfect one, and will, unfortunately, like the betaine hydrochloride, I think that solutions like that, even though they're better than pharmaceutical solutions, they will have a delayed problem showing up. And so maybe in a certain sense they're not better, because you think that you've solved your problem and you haven't. You've actually ignored it and allowed it to worsen, right? So when you ignore something, it tends to just get worse and worse. It doesn't just go away on its own usually, especially if it's been there for 3 years. So it can, what it means is, like, the first sign of the really deep problem is this reflux. You know that you haven't solved the deepest problem. If you get rid of the reflux with a simple easy out like taking betaine hydrochloride, then you just forget that you actually even have a problem, because you don't see it anymore. It's invisible, and yet it's growing in the background, especially if it's due to a pathogenic overgrowth. Then that gets bigger, it grows more, right? And then other problems pop up in other places again, but they're really just signs. That they're not, the vocabulary is, you have to think about what we mean when we say words, right? Like, pain is not the problem. Pain is the solution. It prevents damage, right? So pain tells you, get away from that thing that's going to hurt you, right? That pain is good. Symptoms are good. Symptoms are, like I said, they're the solution in two ways. One is that they're signaling there's a problem here, there's a fire, there's something you got to get away from. And two, they're usually actually trying to fix the problem. They're trying to put out the fire itself, right? Although it looks like the opposite, right? It's not like that analogy of putting on the fire is not as good as the analogy of an enemy invading you and you having to like destroy your own infrastructure to get rid of them and then rebuild it. And the amazing thing about the body is rebuilding infrastructure usually happens really, really fast. I mean, like, you can get super, super sick for like 3-4 days from like an upper respiratory thing. And then, like, once you tip the balance over, like once you've gotten rid of the problem, and then like, boom, you're like better, like within 12 hours. So the problem was actually building before you got the symptoms, right? So that was the enemy invading. And then the symptoms are the solution, wiping out the enemy and making yourself, feel quite bad because of that. And then you rebuild and you're back to normal, right? So that's pretty fast, right? To fight a war and be back to normal within 3 or 4 days. I mean, that's incredible, and that's how incredible the body is. And we expect it to not even fight wars. We expect it to just like wave a magic wand and delete the enemies and go back to normal, right? Like, you have to understand, again, we live in a reality that we're subject to the rules of. Okay, we're not, we're not gods. We live in a certain reality, and I mean, things work so much better than you could have ever imagined being able to create yourself from scratch, right? If you could even imagine creating an organism from scratch that works so well. I mean, it's just it's mind-boggling, right? The stuff that we make, the robots we make, they don't work like that. They don't heal themselves when they get shot at, right? Like, you have to go and fix them yourself, right? They're not self-healing. We are, and it works incredibly well, and yet it doesn't work well enough for most people. I think it used to work well enough for most people. If people understand it, then it works fantastic, right? When they really understand that, oh, that's what's going on. I'm fixing my problem, and I have to put up with a little discomfort to do that. So you got to think of yourself as the species of gazelle, right? You're not even the herd of gazelles. You're the whole species, okay? And letting go of a few of these cells, fine. It sucks. You can cry a little bit, whatever, but it's necessary for the survival of the species. All right, so Jermaine says, did you connect with Dr. Brownstein? No. He had innovative treatments at the start of COVID. Yeah, I got his book, and wasn't supported by the establishment. And I read about vitamin A, D, zinc, C, and iodine for treating COVID, probably from him. Yeah. So just on this topic, I think it's, certainly you can boost your immune system acutely with things like A, D, zinc, C, iodine, and etc. Quercetin, bromelain, all that stuff. But taking, especially a hormone, D is a hormone, right? So you don't want to take hormones long term at all. And I even hesitate to suggest taking it. Like I would prefer to take D in the form of like a liver, like a cod liver supplement or something. Not a supplement, but cod liver itself, or fish. But yeah, I mean, if you're in a situation where you really need a big shot in the arm for your immune system, that's fine. But long term, look at the autoimmune disease article on that talks about vitamin D. Long term, even low D levels may not actually be low, because there's two forms of vitamin D, and only the quote unquote inactive one is checked. Although in chronic autoimmune disease, that inactive one actually suppresses the immune system and can improve symptoms. And the active form is the one that's trying to stimulate your immune system to fight off the autoimmune disease. And so this is a big misunderstanding in the autoimmune disease vitamin D world, that people will feel better, and sometimes for years, by taking exogenous supplemental vitamin D, and actually they're just raising their inactive levels. They're not, if they had checked their active levels, they would have seen that they were super high already, and they couldn't go any higher. And so they're actually just kicking off the active form from the receptor and replacing it with the inactive form. And they take a lot of high dose vitamin D, and in their body, it actually suppressed the inactive form, raised the active form. And they're just checking the inactive form, and they see it very low, maybe even like vanishingly low, or like very, very low. And they assume. So, and the reason that happens is because the active form is much more expensive to test for. And there's this assumption that they are the same level, right? Whichever one you check, it doesn't matter. It's not true. So we know that's not true. And anyway, vitamin D science is actually, like most science, is they haven't done basic science stuff to understand the systems. Like, I just saw this article, and I just became aware of this, that no one really agrees on how planes fly. Okay, Bernoulli's principle that we all learned in school doesn't fully explain it. It's not fully coherent. Newton's laws don't fully explain it. They're not fully coherent. So we understand the equations that allow planes to fly, but we just don't understand why. What's happening in the equations is happening. So we don't really understand why the pressure above the wing is less, and why you can flip a plane upside down and fly upside down if Bernoulli's principle applies. I mean, there's a lot of weird things about it when you think about it. And actually, all of science is like this. Like science has become so biased by its funding sources that people don't even ask the super basic, even super intelligent people, until they get really deep in the weeds on a certain subject. They don't even realize the assumptions they're making don't even make sense at the end of the day. So one of those people who's thinking about this stuff is the person who studied the fourth phase of water and wrote about it, Gerald Pollack. He's actually going to be publishing a book called Charged. And so apparently he solves this problem of how planes fly and how weather works and a lot of other things. And it probably has something to do with charge and perhaps even, water molecules. I don't know, dissolved in the air, although I'm sure you can fly in dry air too, right? So anyway, there's something to do with charge that solves that problem. He's not giving away the answer until his book is published in the next 6 or 7 months. I think in the next 3 or 4 months it's coming out. So I'm looking forward to that. But there's hardly anyone else who's like publishing at least works that people can read, in terms of books and stuff, for the mainstream, for the public, that is talking about these kind of like unanswered basic questions about how does water work. We don't even know, right? Like we don't understand basic things about water, and apparently we don't understand basic things about flight 100 years into having airplanes, and hundreds of millions of years into having birds, flying around. So I forget where I started with that line of thought. Something to do with the vitamins, right? So yeah. Anyway, my point was that getting back to the point is be careful about long-term use of any supplement or substance that's been isolated from its natural context. So like vitamin D or really anything that's available in nature from sunlight. That's primarily what low vitamin D primarily means. If it's actually low, the active form means you don't get enough sun. That's the meaning of it. So get more sun. And a small percentage of it can come from food, but mostly it needs to come from sun. And it's a marker of low sun exposure. And sun does a lot more than vitamin D. It does hundreds of other things, right? So, all the different wavelengths, like I said, UVB, one of its, benefits is triggering vitamin D production, but it also does other things other than vitamin D. So there's hormones, there's anti-inflammatory stuff. It structures the water at a quantum level in a way that allows quantum effects to happen, that allows blood flow to happen. Just this comes from Gerald Pollack's work, that the infrared wavelengths, which form most of sunlight, actually increase this like gel-like structure of water, which creates a battery within your body, which allows blood to flow. So actually the energy for blood to flow comes from sunlight. And the less infrared you get, the less, well your vascular system works, and every other system. The less well ATP production works, the less well mitochondria work, less well everything works. So it's really a deep rabbit hole that's really incredibly amazing, very fascinating. All right, so if people missed it, in that article on, food is not what you think, I talk about how we now know that, and this is just in the last year or two, or a few years maybe, that sunlight, when it hits the melanin in your skin, separates water into basically food. Okay, it separates it into electrons, protons, and oxygen, which are what go into the mitochondria and create the ATP that powers a lot of things, or is involved in a lot of enzyme interactions. And a lot of the work that our bodies do, like ATP, makes muscles contract and makes everything happen. At least that's one version of reality that a lot of people believe, but it's certainly important, deeply, entwined in all of physiological functioning. Although some people like Joel Pollack actually think that most of the energy we use comes from other things like quantum effects and structuring of water and electrical effects from the battery that is created inside water when there's a positive area and a negative area. So that charge separation inside of water can create electricity, essentially, that our body can use to power itself as well, and to power everything that it does along with ATP. So like in some situations, in some, like when you're using a muscle consistently over and over, really, really working that muscle consistently, based on some simulations, the amount of ATP that's possible to produce in the body just doesn't account for the ability of that muscle to keep contracting. Like we're just using too much energy, and the shortfall has to be, where is the rest of the energy coming from? That's the question. And it comes probably from structures in the water and the way things are structured, and semiconductors, biological semiconductors, that create electricity flow. And water is one of them. and a lot of other proteins are as well, including melanin. All right, so Jason says, on the low histamine diet, no seed oils, use olive oil. Could you speak about histamine intolerance? So you have histamine intolerance, you're on a low histamine diet with no seed oils, and just make sure the olive oil is real. I mean, the only way is, I think, like Kirkland's, apparently, although it's in plastic, they do have a seal of approval from a certain regulatory authority that checks and makes sure that the supply chain is real olive oil and it's good quality. It's actually virgin and it's actually from Italy, whatever. So that's probably the cheapest version. If you're the cheapest form of real olive oil, if you're in the U.S., although it comes in plastic, I would prefer bottle. But at Walmart, other places, I've seen California Olive Ranch. Although, again, it's in plastic, but you can buy it directly from their website in glass. And if you buy direct from a farm in glass, that would be ultimate for olive oil in most cases, that you would be sure that this is real olive oil and it hasn't been adulterated. So everything is adulterated, unfortunately. On this subject, avocado oil, the issue is the hexane that they use to extract, whatever, during extraction or during production. Not the macronutrient profile or anything, or sorry, the fat profile of the oil. Avocado oil, again, is not one of those traditional oils, probably because you need hexane to properly produce it. So if you can get hexane free avocado, that might be fine. But I just stick to the natural ones that have withstood the test of time. That's the precautionary principle. Use what people have always used. Don't get fancy. But yeah, histamine intolerance, it's the same underlying issue that your body. Histamine is an inflammatory molecule, right? And so it's a little bit of your immune system that is not overreacting, actually reacting appropriately to what's in your body. It's in your own body trying to get it out. It's trying to remove a problem, whether that's spike protein, and something is obstructing the way. And so low histamine, one way of looking at it is you're managing the symptoms, but you're actually suppressing the solution to your problem. So you need to help your body get rid of the problem in a different way that's not as uncomfortable, which means, you kill pathogens using things like chlorine dioxide and other things, and you remove toxins in other ways, or help your body remove toxins, right? So you're trying to help solve the problem, with supportive measures, while fixing your environment, fixing your lifestyle, and minimizing the discomfort that you have to go through to get through that process. So it's really a version of the same answer that I've been giving. Lily says, what about the autophagy, the fasting versus the eating within 30 minutes? So, I mean, autophagy is definitely required for people to maintain their health and oftentimes to regain their health. And I'm not sure what you mean by eating within 30 minutes, but like if you only ate for 30 minutes a day, yeah, I mean, you're going to be able to do a lot more autophagy in 23 and a half hours than somebody who eats, multiple times a day. So fasting can be really helpful. Dry fasting is a technique that can be used. I would be careful with it and maybe just do periods of it intermixed with regular diet or just water fasting. And again, like in some cases, people need to support themselves before they do the fasting. In other cases, they can just go straight to fasting. I mean, it's a case by case basis. You got to figure out what's going on with the person. So yeah, autophagy stimulated by fasting can be super helpful. And it's just that you need to have a game plan. It's like fighting a war, and no matter, best laid plans in war, they all go to hell as soon as the bullets start firing, right? Like things start changing so quickly. That's what happens when you try to give somebody like a generic protocol for something. Everything changes 3 days into it, and then you have to change things, and you have to reassure them, and you have to tweak things, and then it's always going to change over time. I mean, you might uncover something like an ambush or something similar to an ambush. You uncover something that you weren't aware of, and you got to deal with that. So no one's going to know the entire situation, the entire long arc of a war on day one of the war, right? You could have Napoleon, you could have Alexander the Great, it doesn't matter. They're not going to be able to predict every single thing that happens in any war, but they're so good at war that they can respond in real time to any situation that comes up and win the battle and finally win the war. That's what a good, a good wise doctor really is for you. That you're fighting a battle. You gotta realize that you're fighting a battle against toxins and pathogens inside of you, and you gotta avoid shooting yourself. You gotta avoid the friendly fire as much as possible. But in some cases, you need to allow that to happen to some extent, but manage it. All right, everyone. Nattokinase, some people have found to be helpful for blood pressure as well, for sure. And probably, like I said, getting back to it, the best thing for most people is to just fix their light environment. That'll do a whole lot for your blood pressure. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure, and try to be on time next week. And see you next time. All right, bye bye.